let's take another lens to this as well and talk about women of color and
Oh,
what does this look like too, which obviously that's a whole nother discussion. But I'd love to dive into that. As I'm an investor, I'm focused on women rights. Now we're kind of narrowing down this idea of what that means. And so, how does it look when somebody comes to you and says, Kayleen, I'm really interested in lending or investing in women led companies, but I want to take a particular focus on women of color? What's your approach there? How do you start thinking about the conversation?
well, first of all, I congratulate them because I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. If the statistics about, the number and the volume of money going to women-owned, women-led businesses is abysmal, it's even worse for women of color, right? And I, as you know, Mark, I do most of my work in emerging markets. And so
Yep.
the irony of it here is that I think that in the US and Europe, we need to kind of flip that on its head. Because if we, if 50% of the world's population are women, but then 70% of those women are women of color. So
Right. Hello.
this actually isn't about, white women having a savior complex, investing in women of color. It needs to go the other way around. Most of the women in the world are women of color, and we need to figure out how to create some equilibrium there and invest proportionally and representatively, if that's a word. And so I think for me, a lot of the investors that I work with will have regional preferences or industry preferences. And so we
Mhm.
start there because I can appreciate for a lot of people applying what a lot of people consider a social lens to an investment strategy or an investment philosophy is really scary and uncomfortable. So I do
Yeah.
like to make sure that we start with where they are comfortable. One thing that I will say that I'm a huge advocate for, and I'm happy to see we're finally getting traction on, is that I think gender lens investing is allowing us to coalesce and move away from this notion that women are only worthy of charity or beneficiaries or the recipients of other people's money. So when I talk to investors about gender lens investing, I want to make sure that they understand that they are playing an active role as an investment in women. And those women's are clients, those women are entrepreneurs, right? Those women don't need to be empowered, they are already empowered. We just need to help level the playing field with respect to access to capital.
Thank you. That's great. And so noted about being empowered. It's like they are empowered and we just need to hook up the capital pipeline to them. What other sometimes it's not just about money though, too, right? So
Correct.
when we start talking about lending or supporting disadvantaged communities or whatever, a lot of folks will talk about technical assistance and capacity building as well. What are you seeing as like an add-on supplement in terms of capital investment capital, but what else is needed as a supplement to support the growth and prosperity?
No, thank you for asking that. I think specifically for women entrepreneurs, that capacity building or TA is critical. Not because women are incapable of running businesses or large companies or whatever they want, but because in so many cultures and societies, including my own, and I'm a straight up American, we don't really encourage or teach girls that it's okay to be a leader, it's okay to be a boss, that it's okay to have people not like you, right? And I think for a lot of women entrepreneurs, it's fundamentally helping them build the confidence that they can be a leader of a team, that they can grow a business, and that it's okay if people on their team don't like them all the time. It's okay for them to say no. And so I think a lot of the technical assistance and capacity building is pure leadership and mentoring skills. Although I will say, and a lot of this is because of cultural preferences or cultural norms, women also don't necessarily learn how to formally run a business, right? They're not taught how to develop an HR strategy or manage an IT team or put together financial statements. So I think that there's also a technical capacity issue. But I think first and foremost, if we can just help women get the confidence and come overcome some of the cultural norms and hurdles that they're either encountering in the society as a whole or even in their own household, that it is okay for them to be a boss and they shouldn't take a back seat to anyone. I think that goes a long way.
And when we talk about cultural norms, we're also talking about the US.
Oh, I lead with the US. I mean, totally. I think the US and Europe
Because it's easy,
are no better.
yeah, it's easy to think of, a weaving cooperative in Bangladesh or whatever. But we're talking about the US here as well.
Yeah, and I think if
These
you talk
cultures.
to women entrepreneurs from the US, it's no different, right? We're not taught women in the US, and I mean I did my undergraduate and graduate work in the United States. So we're just not taught that it's okay to be a leader, it's okay to be a boss. It's okay to state your opinion and have other people disagree with you. And I think that those are fundamental skills to being a good entrepreneur.
Yeah. And when you march into the boardroom, or, to a presentation and it's like, oh my gosh, wow, we have a woman money manager or a woman investment advisor or whatever, how are you perceived, or what do you take into that boardroom, and how do you navigate that conversation? Because as we talked about, a lot of times investment managers or advisors or whatever are men, and here you're bringing this whole background of your brilliant career and tons of education, at some top-notch schools, bringing that to the table with world experience, and yet some people, woman, so how would you, when you think about like that young girl in, I don't know, Nebraska or something?
Well, I mean, listen, I think I'm still very much a work in progress. I don't think I have it figured out yet. And I think
Yeah,
my approach has certainly changed over the years. Earlier in
yeah.
my career, I was the only woman in the room, and now I see a few other women, and which is always good to see. But I'm still memorable because I'm a woman, and I hope that by the time I retire, that I'm not as memorable. That there's other women in the room, and but I think I'm hoping that there's a sea change happening and that we're going to see more diversity and inclusion, both in gender and other things. And to be fair, I come to gender lens investing as almost with a bit of reluctance myself. I have never considered myself a feminist or like, that kind of thing, but I'm also learning to change what I think being a feminist is. And so I
Mm,
come to gender lens investing, like I said early on, for me, gender lens investing is not just about women, but it's also about men, right? And so when I encounter a room of men who are skeptical about gender lens investing or reluctant, I try to empathize and put myself in their shoes, even though I'm not a man. Because for me, if we can do gender lens investing right, we're talking about gender equity. And what that means for me is that it's okay for a man to want to take um, time off to be a stay-at-home dad. That it's okay for men to be in positions that are traditionally held by women, and that there's the stigmas around what jobs are okay for what gender go away. And so
mhm.
for me, it is about men because I often try to put men, particularly men who are fathers, and say, listen, do you really want to have a conversation with your daughter about how should she react, not if but when a man makes unwanted sexual advances to her at work? Because
Mm,
unless we talk about bringing gender equity into the workplace, you need to have that conversation with your 8-year-old daughter because
yeah,
it will happen. and
yeah.
and I think helping them understand that maybe they can't understand what it's like to be a woman in a professional career, but helping them understand what the reality might be like for their daughters helps to
Mm,
bridge that gap a bit.
and thank you. Most of your clients, when would you say they're men, they're women, mix?
I would say that most of the fund managers and asset managers that I work with are men for sure,
Mhm.
because I mean, it's
As
just
we talked about,
statistically they're going to be men, right?
yeah,
Um,
white men.
yeah, and I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with are women, and Yeah,
And
that's
let
an
me
that's
ask
a
you
good question, Mark.